Good morning, Illinois. Thank you for having me. I'm from Pennsylvania. It's kind of dreary back home today, and I got off the plane here, and it's bright and sunny. So, and you're actually 10 degrees warmer than we are back home. So, it's a bonus. It's a bonus. So, yeah, it can stay out there. So, well, thanks for attending. This is actually one of the favorite talks that I get asked to give. So, you're in luck. I think of all the breakouts you had the opportunity to attend, this is going to be the best one. So, all of your compatriots that are sitting in those other ones, they can listen to us laugh and have a good time. So we've got an hour together, and we've got a ton of stuff to cover. But I want your interaction. I love to take questions. I love feedback as we go. So by all means, if you want to take a deeper dive into something I've got up here and I'm ready to move on, just shout and stop, because I want to make sure that we get to cover what you want covered out of this, because after all, the slides are posted. You can read the stuff we don't get to if it comes down to that. Okay? But there are a couple of objectives, things that, and Rob mentioned a couple of them in his introduction, and thank you for that. But ultimately, these three things are what we want to focus on. We want to look at what it really means to focus on our employees' key behaviors. And more importantly, do they know what their key behaviors are? So we're going to look at that. We also want to make sure that we can take a look at, well, how do we incent people to perform? And how do we get them to see the connection between where they are, what they do, and the bottom line? Because that's where the magic is. After all, we sit in boardrooms and meeting rooms, and we talk about budgets, and we talk about widgets getting made, and we talk about lawns getting mown, or patients being cared for, or whatever your industry happens to be. And our people go out and they mow those lawns, and they care for those patients, and they make those widgets. And some of them, though, don't really understand or know how their job truly impacts the organization and impacts the bottom line. At the end of today's presentation, you're going to be able to tell them all about it. You're going to be able to connect those dots for those employees and then see the magic happen. Okay? So first off, when I think about employee alignment, all I think about is that it's the perception of whether, from the employee, it's their perception of how and if they impact where the company's going. How and if they impact where the company's going. Now I'm going to ask some questions. Some of them I'm going to say, give me a show of hands. Others I want to keep the guilty out of it, okay? So this one, again, no hands on this one. But if you walked out on your floor today, whatever that means for you, whether it's Cubeville, a shop floor, down the hall, whatever it is, and you asked just a random sampling of your employees, does what you do around here matter? How many of your employees would say absolutely? Versus, I don't know, probably not. Probably doesn't mean anything. And I want you to keep that question in the back of your mind for the next hour. Because at the end of this hour, you're going to be able to see how you can get everyone to not only say, yes, I know exactly what my job means to this organization and what I mean to it and how those dots connect, but they're going to be able to tell you exactly what they do that matters and how important it is. And so that's critical. So ultimately, we're looking at this idea that one of the critical factors in companies meeting their strategic goals is in employee ownership. And yet repeatedly, Wharton has done a number of studies among other organizations, and they found that the key thing that keeps companies from hitting strategy is that their employees don't take ownership. And yet it's kind of hard to take ownership if you don't know what you're taking ownership of. We're going to look at that. Another thing, and I give you some of these stats, not because I'm trying to insult you, because hopefully you've seen some of these stats, but it gives you a chance to take them back and use these stats as fodder when you're talking with management, okay? Other Wharton studies seem to indicate that if you can create this alignment between where the company's going and what I'm doing, that's where the magic of engagement happens. I've got a client right now. I'm actually working on their succession plan. It's a small advertising firm. And the owner is ready to retire in the next 3 to 5 years. Perfect time to start succession planning. He's got a couple of young folks in there who are likely heirs to his throne, and we're trying to sift that out. And they're starting to talk about culture. The culture around here is not good. And the more we've delved into it, it's not that it's not good, it's just not what they want it to be. And that's different. And so we'll look at how this can impact culture. Okay? And finally, not one more stat for you, is that it shouldn't be surprised that the more aligned our employees are with the company goals, we start to see commitment go up, loyalty go up, turnover go down, all the things that we care about. And all it takes is for us to connect the dots. Any companies in here publicly traded? Reps from publicly traded companies? A couple of you? Okay. There's some impact for you guys too. Watson Wyatt did a survey of just publicly traded companies, and they found a lot higher shareholder returns in companies whose employees get it. So whether you're privately held, small, large, private, not-for-profit, does not matter. The impacts of getting our employees connected into the strategy of the organization, its results, and where it's headed are huge. And that's really what I want you to be able to walk away with today, is to connect those dots for your people. So we mentioned that employee alignment is really about perception. Do I understand that what I do with this widget matters? I'll give you an example. When I was in college, I worked the docks at UPS. So I'd get up at 3 in the morning, I'd schlep boxes into the brown trucks, go home, shower, go to class. I never once saw a customer, at least not at that point in my career. If I beat a package up or I put it on the wrong truck, didn't matter to me. I did my job, I got paid, I went to class. So my perception of what really matters was get the boxes off of the conveyor belt and get them in a truck, because if they were laying around, your boss was going to yell at you. Get them loaded. So what do you think happened when we got real busy? What's that? Well, things get messed up, but I just made boxes disappear, right? Get them in the trucks. I don't want to be yelled at, because that's what productivity was, that's what was preached to us. I don't know where Main Street is. I'm putting it in this truck, okay? What's the problem with that? Who gets impacted? Right? But I never saw the customers. There was no connection there, because at that point in time, there was no communication method to say, hey, Ed, really, you're putting Main Street, Chicago on Main Street, South Bend. I don't know. It's going the wrong way, okay? And that's a problem. Most people, if I said to you who impacts whether or not you get your box at UPS, what would you have said before I told you that story? The driver, right? But the driver can only deliver what's on his or her truck that day. If your box says it's en route, and the driver's at the end of his route, and there's no more boxes on his truck, what's he supposed to do for you? Your box is en route to somewhere, we just don't know where, okay? And so how many of you have people like that are not customer-facing and yet ultimately impact whether or not your client gets the service that they need? How many of you have that? Really, that's it? Not more of you? I'm surprised by that. Okay, but we'll run with that. We'll run with that. Because those folks, I bet, are some of your part-time positions, seasonal positions, temp positions. How many of you have those classifications of positions that are customer-facing? Okay, all right. But a lot of you have those. No surprise that those positions, we don't focus on them a whole lot. At least not in terms of trying to engage those people and connect them to the strategy. And yet, when I think about my time as an hourly employee at UPS, the hourly employees made up 2/3 of the workforce. And half of those 2/3 never once saw a customer. And yet they impact whether or not you get your box on time. And so I want you to think about the employees that you have and who are truly key to meeting your company goals. Now, are there any company presidents in here? Good, let's talk about it. So when they're not at the office, what happens? Everything's fine. Things run like clock. Maybe they run better. How many they run better? Like, yes, boss, going to retreat? Hallelujah. We're getting stuff done. all right? But let your janitor be gone and the toilet back up. Or it be a snowy, cruddy day in wintertime and all that salt muck is being dragged through your lobby. And so we look and we say, oh, well, the janitor doesn't really contribute to our strategic goals. Come on. Really? So keeping your workplace clean, neat, presentable, as a place for the first look that your customers may have if they're coming into your lobby or any public areas of your building, including your restrooms, keeping those neat and professional looking doesn't help your image. I asked the question one time, I said, give me a position that you have in your organization that does not impact your strategy. And people thought, yeah, I got one. We got some data entry people. All they do is enter data in. I said, oh, really? Well, why are they entering that data? Well, it's customer information. It's this. She rattled off a couple minutes. I said, okay, so if they're doing all that stuff, what happens if that doesn't get done? Well, then she started telling us horror stories. This happens. Well, then how can you say that they're not connected to your strategy? I don't understand. If you're sitting here and you have a job that's not connected to your strategy, what should you do with it? Get rid of it. Amen. Okay? We don't need that job. So if you're sitting here right now saying, yeah, this job, what he's talking about, it really doesn't impact. Get rid of it. You don't need it then. Every job you have is connected somehow to your strategy. Guarantee it. Okay? So ultimately, when we think about this idea of how we connect the dots, it's different based on who we're speaking to. Okay? So when you think about it, if you have widget makers, you've got a manufacturing facility, and I tell you at the end of the day you need to make 10 widgets, when do you know if you've hit your goal? When you've made 10 widgets, or at the end of the day, you go to punch out. I mean, it sounds basic, but our folks know that. They know that they hit their goal or not at the end of the day. We call that short term, a short-term line of sight that I can see my results. A friend of mine runs a landscaping business, and he sends his mowing crews out. They know how many lawns they have to get mown, whether they're residential or commercial. If he sends his hardscaping crew out, how many retention walls, how many feet of a retention wall should they be able to lay in a given period of time? Okay? They have all that. So at the end of the day, they know. What's wrong with purely focusing on that short-term goal?
Sets the expectation lower to that point.
How so?
Well, because you might have people like, well, the expectation was to make 10 of these. I've made 10.
Ah,
So
I made 10 by noon.
They only want me to make 10. Now, that's all they want.
That's all I have to do. Friend of mine's in banking. He switched banks. He was given his quota of how many loans he had to underwrite and the amount of deposits he had to get, all the typical stuff you would do in banking. He hit his goal in May of 2018. Now, two problems there. One, obviously it was not enough of a goal, but two, he landed a monster account. And really, the way his bonus structure was laid out, he could have just kicked up, put his feet on the desk for the next 5 months and said, I don't have to do anything, because there was nothing more in it for him. So we've got to look at that. But here's the other problem with short-term line of sight. If all I worry about is the here and now, what happens? Yeah, I lose sight of where I'm going. So just think about for a moment, if I had you all get up and come to the front of the room, and I asked you to keep your heads down and do this, and just start walking, how many of you would feel comfortable doing that? Anybody? I mean, you can walk 5, 10 feet maybe, okay? But you're only seeing 2 or 3 feet in front of you. You're probably not going to end up where you want to end up. That's why we look ahead. That's about long-term line of sight. Who loves longer-term lines of sight? You do, but you are Management, okay? Why do we like long-term line of sight? What does it do for us?
Just a bigger picture.
Bigger picture? What else? I'm sorry? Helps us plan.
Shareholder or stakeholder.
Okay, so our external folks that have a stake, it might meet their concerns. I'm sorry?
Saves on work if you have longer.
Saves on work. It also allows me to take into consideration cyclical natures in my business. Back home, it's been rainy this summer. It's been weird. We will get dumped on like biblical proportions. And then for 3 weeks, sun. Nothing. And then another week, the monsoons come through again. And then 2 weeks. It's been insane. So anyone who works outside is behind. So if I tell you you have to lay so many feet of retaining wall or mow so many yards, well, it's been raining for 4 weeks. How far behind are you? Well, we know this happens. We know that many of our businesses are cyclical. How many of you have a peak month or couple of months in your business? How many of you are like holiday time? Okay, how many of it's, I don't know, summertime? Okay, so whatever it is, what if you just planned, those of you that are summertime, if you just planned based on what you looked at from May to August? I bet you're going to miss a whole bunch of goals because you're going to extrapolate those 3 months out for the year and say, we can do this 12 months out of the year, but maybe we can't. Those of you that have time around the holidays, that's 6 weeks, that's even shorter. So here's the problem. We've got to balance these two. Our frontline people like that short-term line of sight. They get their, quote, reward. They see what they've done nearly immediately, if not that day, that week, that month. But in management, we know we've got to express that over a longer term, okay? And we're going to learn about that today. So ultimately, when we think about span of control, at the employee and at the team level, they've got a ton of control over their daily activities and their ability, in many cases, to hit their goals. However, we know as we go up to the departmental level or up to organizational level, we have much better measurement accuracy. We know that we can plan out the bumps in the road, the peaks and the valleys, the cyclicalness of our business to understand what's really going on. So if we're telling 20 people to make 10 widgets a day, what does that mean over the course of a week, a month, a year in terms of widgets? Okay? And so we've got to be able to rectify and speak both of those languages in order to really get everyone from frontline up to top management focused on where the company's headed. Okay? So a couple of quick things here. Shorter the line of sight, people love it. Longer line of sight, management loves it. But we've got to focus on both. We can't pick one. This is not a which is best, Ed. It's both. And it's going to impact the way we communicate. And we're going to talk about that next. Okay? So if you think about your people that have been with you the longest, it's probably no surprise that they've got a good line of sight to where the organization is headed. And why is that? The people that have been with you the longest, why would they have the best line of sight to your strategy?
They've been through the cycles.
Okay, been through numerous cycles. What else may they have done?
Hopefully they've heard the consistent message year after year.
Consistent messaging on where we're headed and why. That's a good one. They've what? Grown with the company. Maybe that means in terms of their role, perhaps.
I was going to say this kind of along the same lines as maybe they were part of the planning.
Okay, part of the planning. Maybe they've held different roles. So I'm sorry? Yeah.
Say maybe they've seen the results or the consequences.
Okay, so they've seen the fruits of the labor or the downfalls in poor planning. Sure. So that shouldn't be a surprise, okay, that the people that have been with us the longest and perhaps have experienced all of these things have a really good idea of what makes our company tick, okay? But then I want you to think about your lower level employees, those frontline folks. How many of you would say that your most frontline employees are the ones that you do the most hiring of? Yes? Show of hands. Yes? Okay. So that usually means that's a churn position or something. Shouldn't be a surprise. Those folks don't have a very good line of sight. They're new, they come in, they're your temps, they're your part-timers, they're your seasonals. And yet, think about when you go to a fine dining restaurant. Why are you going to a fine dining restaurant? Service and quality of the food, maybe the experience, okay? What if your steak, your lobster, whatever it is that's your preference, comes out on that plate and it's divine, and your waitstaff is rude? You going back? They bring a chef in from some famous part of Europe, but you're not going back because of the experience of that front-line person, the experts in the back, all right? So we have to think about how often, especially as we're crashing head-on into holiday season here, and you'll go to the mall and you'll look for those gifts for loved ones. And how many of the people that you interact with are going to be part-time, temporary, seasonal people that are going to impact your experience at the mall, at that favorite store of yours? And will that impact you or jade you in some way for the rest of the year? Like, I had that crappy experience because I wanted to go buy a candle and the person was rude. I'm not going to that candle store ever again. Okay? So we have to think about that. What are we doing in terms of communicating, not just with our long-term people, not just with our full-timers, but across the board? And thank you for mentioning that consistency of message, because that's where we're headed. Okay? So ultimately, I love this world at work model. Okay? It reads from left to right. Everything starts with our business strategy. How many of you know that your company has a strategic plan? Show of hands, and keep them up. Excellent, lots of you, okay? How many? No, I said keep them up. How many of you have seen the plan? Excellent, okay. Most times about half the hands drop. And that disturbs me, because as HR folks, we can't communicate the plan if we haven't seen it, okay? Now, there are 3 types of business strategy, and this is critical for us to know, because we need to be able to communicate out not only our strategy, but why it is what it is. The first type of business strategy is operational excellence. A company that's focused on operational excellence says, we are going to run so efficiently, so smoothly, that our products and services, they're going to roll off the line, and that's how we're going to drive value to our customers. Think of a company, give me a company that has a strategy of operational excellence. Okay, Amazon, I'm good with that. It's all about logistics. I'm sorry? Starbucks. Why do you say Starbucks?
Because of their efficiency and their quickness, it's all uniform as far as strategies.
Okay, how many of you go to Starbucks on a daily basis, probably? How many of you are regular Starbucks people? Okay, why do you go to Starbucks? Like the drinks?
I actually go to the one I go to because they're fast.
Because they're fast, okay.
The quality.
Quality? They know your order? Ah, cool.
It's
Consistent. I only heard one fast. We don't go to, we $10 for a mocha latte jambalaya, I don't know, concoction because they have operational excellence. We just don't. We go there and we pay $10 for that because of our perception that it's a quality, it's a better coffee than other coffees. Because honestly, folks, if it wasn't better coffee, would you pay $10 for that thing? No. So we'll come back to Starbucks. They are on my list. I just don't believe they're operational excellence. Okay? Give me another operational excellence. Chick-fil-A? Why?
I think they have great customer service.
Okay, but that's not operational excellence. We'll come back to them.
McDonald's.
All right, this session's done. Clearly you guys have lunch on your minds. Thank you, Walmart. No one ever mentions Walmart. Why? Because we don't want to admit. None of us have ever shopped at Walmart. You ever notice that? No one wants to admit they go to Walmart, but clearly people go to Walmart, okay? Why is Walmart so operationally efficient? No, it's not because they have low prices. Low prices are an effect of Yeah, because I'm going to carry a club, and if you want to do business with me, you're going to give me a price, or I'm going to whack you over the head until you do. Okay? That's their strong vendor relationship.
Yeah, I was gonna say they make their vendors do a lot of the work.
Absolutely. Okay? Also, their logistics systems have been built by former UPS and FedEx engineers. Okay? That's the other side of their equation. Yes, Walmart is about operational efficiency to drive the prices, which is what gets you in the door. Okay? Now, second type of business strategy is product or service excellence. Now, can you think of someone who has product or service excellence? Starbucks, yes, okay, so there's Starbucks. Product or service excellence. Nordstrom, I hear that one a lot. Yes. Any others? You offering up Chick-fil-A again? Okay, Southwest Airlines for product or service excellence. You know, I still hear that, not as much as in years past, though, but I'll take it. Okay, most luxury cars, they'll come to your house, they pick your car up, and they whisk it away, and they leave you a loaner, and there's no sitting at Joe the mechanic shop for 3 hours waiting on your oil change kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, Tiffany's, yes. Okay, so we're paying more for that stuff because we're paying for the experience. Okay? Now, the last type of business strategy is, we'll call it product. So we had service, product, product leadership. Let's call it that, product leadership. Give me a product leadership organization. Apple. Okay. Tesla, perhaps. Okay? Product leadership. So I will buy from that company, I will pay $500 for an iPhone that does 99% of what this little flip job over here will do for $50. Why? Because it's Apple. They're putting a lot of money into their R&D. Okay? Who else puts a lot of money into R&D as an industry? I'm sorry? Pharmaceuticals, absolutely. Okay? Now, I'm willing to bet for those of you that have seen your business strategy, you're saying, Ed, none of that's in our business strategy. It's probably written between the lines. Think about what your strategic plan says, where it's going, and does it fit into one of those three buckets? I guarantee it does. Now, you may have your feet or your toes in the other two buckets, because we all do. But I guarantee you that there's one of them that you're really saying, that's where my company's headed. That's what we're all about. Now, why did I spend time on that? Because that business strategy bleeds into everything else we do in HR. It helps to set our organizational culture. And it influences our HR strategy. And those things wrap around all our total rewards, our pay, our benefits, work-life systems, performance management, learning and development. It wraps around all that. Our strategy impacts all of that stuff. And here's where the magic happens. If we get that right, that leads to great employees coming in the door. We keep them. We get a lot of production out of them. But look right here. See that gap in the, everything kind of flows. And all of a sudden we get this gap. That's where employee alignment happens. If we get all of this right and we communicate it effectively, and we're going to talk about the communication piece now, that's what gets us our business and performance results. Those business performance results allow us to reinvest in our people, and so the wheel spins. It becomes a beautiful thing when those folks that we've communicated with can now effectively see how what they've done has mattered. Okay? So we're going to look at a 4-step process for making this happen. So 4 steps is not so bad, okay? But it takes time. And so a lot of times people will say, well, Ed, how long does this take? I don't know. I don't know how culturally ready you are for this. I don't know how large and dispersed your work group is. I don't know what your strategies are. I don't know. What I do know is each step in the process takes longer and longer to get moving, okay? So let's look at the first step, okay? So the first step is, what is our core message? So lady in the back mentioned that consistent message. Are we saying what we need to say in a way that our people can understand it? Now, what I mean by understanding is that they can relate it to themselves and their job and their experience. So if I told you, if I was your company president and I stood up here today at a management meeting and I said, hey gang, our goal for this year is to increase revenues by $5 million. What does that mean to you?
Nothing.
Nothing? Woo! Maybe, I don't know. If you're in sales, what does it mean to you?
We got more work to do.
You got more work to do. You're one of my widget makers. What does it mean to you? What's it mean? Got to work harder. Got to make more widgets. Okay? It means something to each one of us. All right? So if I don't paint the picture of what that means, that translates into one more widget a day per employee. That's it. One more. Now it sounds different, because if I tell the average frontline employee we're going to increase revenues by $5 million, and that means we got to make more widgets right away, ding, 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 alarms start going off. Oh my gosh. But if I'm able to say, you know what? If we just make one more widget a day per person, I bump that 10 widgets up to 11, we can hit that goal. Maybe the employees say, okay. And guess what? In sales, we're opening up a new territory. So you're going to have an opportunity to go in there, and we don't have any competition in that territory. Are dollar signs lighting up for you now? Because commissions. So it's all in the context of how I lay out that message. What do we typically do when we roll out a message like that?
And give out some high-level mumbo-jumbo that most people can't understand at the module level.
See, I like that term. High-level mumbo-jumbo. Okay? And isn't that true? Stuff comes out, and you see it in advertising. How many of you ever watched on the TV, seen an ad, and you're like, I have no idea what that ad was for. I've seen stuff, I think it's a great ad, and at the end I'm like, I don't know what they were advertising, but that was a cool ad. Okay? It's stuff, it doesn't hit the mark, and then we wonder why our people aren't bought in. Okay? We've got to put it in context. I was working with an organization, large German-owned company. You have their products in your home, guarantee it. And their employee opinion survey results had tanked from the year before. So we were doing some focus groups in there, trying to figure out what was going on. And I kept hearing about communication. It kept coming up and coming up. And I didn't understand it, because they had town hall meetings, and they had focus group meetings, and there was stuff on the walls. I mean, they were relatively open book. And I couldn't figure out, why is communication a problem? And so finally, one of the people in the group said, hey, Ed, let's take a walk down to the cafeteria. So we did. The group of us got up out of the meeting room, down to the cafeteria, and they had a big wall. Oh, anything you want to know about the company's on the wall. I'm not just talking about the HR stuff. I'm talking about financials. Everything was up there. And he said, what do you see? And I told him, I see all this stuff. He says, take a closer look. So I'm really looking close now. What did I see in all of the financial information? What do you think I saw in there? Because it sounds good that we're sharing financials, right? That's sounding.
Relate to you and how you're impacted.
Okay, so revenue per share and net profit, yeah, kinda. I've already given you a hint. It was a German company. When they communicated their financials, it was communicated in euros. Now, I don't know about you guys. I don't know what today's exchange rate is. I just know that if you tell me we're up €1 million, hey, that sounds good, great. But I don't really know what that means. It's out of context for me. How hard would it have been for their plant manager, when she stood up for the town hall meetings to report this stuff, to just hit convert in Excel? It can't be that hard to tell folks this is how our facility's doing. How often do we do that? Why in HR do we send out that one message? Come on, our bosses aren't here. We can be honest with one another. Why do we do it?
We try to have the employee in mind.
We try to have the employee in mind, but why do we send out that one message for everybody? Come on, be honest. It's easier. Everyone gets the same message. No, they don't. They read the same thing. That's it. They read the same thing. They don't get the same message. So we have to be able to communicate what our business strategy is. What would your people say if you told them your business strategy was operational excellence? What do you think the first question out of their mouth is going to be? What does it mean? What about the customer? Okay? Because we're all the time saying it's all about the customer. Customer's always right. We say all this stuff. So we've got to be able to tell them, here's how you putting your box on the right truck, on the right shelf, in the right spot helps our customers. And if we do that, the drivers are faster. We keep fuel costs down, wear and tear on the vehicles, less overtime. That leads to cost reduction. And guess what? It also gets our customer their box on time. Oh, wow. So it's pretty important that I get that stuff on that truck in the right spot. Now I get it. Okay? So one of the best things you can do when you're going to roll out your company's strategy to your people is ask them for help in drafting the message. Sales needs to hear something different from manufacturing. Who needs to hear something different from R&D? Who needs to hear something from IT? Okay? And you're all going, that's a lot of work, Ed. Darn right it is. So if we're not willing to do the work, we can't get the results. That's really the key. So we have to think about, how do our people need to hear this message? What's the lingo we need to use with them or not use? Don't get up there and start talking about EBITDA, because half the time I can't remember what that acronym means, okay? And most of your people, you're going, yeah, that means, you're thinking about it, right? Because we're not finance people, so we got to stop and think about it. Don't use those kind of terms. Break it down for folks in terms that they get that relates to their job. That's the start of the buy-in, okay? And this little comic says it all. My words came out fine. It's what you heard that's the problem, okay? So we write things from our perspective. And so ultimately, what we have to do is not do the company-wide rollout where we bring everyone together to the Drury Lane Theater, and we have an all-hands meeting, and the president stands up and gives a 10-minute speech about where the company's going. Everyone's like, hoorah! And then meanwhile, over cocktails, I don't know what that guy just said. But hey, we got a day out of work. We got some nice cocktails out of it. Great. Okay? That's a problem. So once we figure out that message and what it needs to say, now we've got to look at leadership and say, hey, your role is to communicate this out. So that means they have to be on board. They have to know how to communicate. This is not a company leader. This is certainly not an HR thing. I believe we drill it down to frontline management to communicate to their people so that they can customize it as they see fit based on their knowledge and experience with their people. Ultimately, what management also has to do is bring that vision out. And that's going to bleed into accountability, which is going to come next. But their actions have to demonstrate that they're on board with this. This is not well, the company said this over here, but yeah, no, we're not going to do that. When I first went into management at UPS, they let you in the operation for a couple of months, and then they send you off to, they call it supervisor leadership school, or at least when I was there, that's what it was called. And it was 3 weeks away. And we used to call it, that's when you got your brown blood transfusion, okay? Out with the red, in with the brown, you're UPSified now, okay? And I can remember going away, it's 3 weeks away from your family, you don't come home on the weekends. So it's arduous. And I remember coming back, and I was in the operation at that time, and the manager said, hey, how was leadership school? I said, it was great, I learned this, I learned that, da, da, da. He says, great, forget all that, you're back in the real world. I'm like, okay, so wait a minute. Even then at 23, I had this sense of what it cost them to take 30 management people out of their respective duties for 3 weeks, plug them away in terms of just pure expenses, but then impact on the operations, and then our personal expense. I mean, one guy was there over his 25th wedding anniversary. You know, I mean, personally, there was sacrifices. And so basically he just told me the sacrifices I just made for the last 3 weeks being away from my family, I should just forget it all? It doesn't even make sense. That's a problem. If we've got leaders pulling that kind of crap in our workplace, what do we have to do with them? They need a good talking to at bare minimum, okay? But maybe they shouldn't be in a leadership role, okay? So they have to be held accountable that their actions and match their words, which match our strategy. That's when the connection starts to happen. I can remember we always had we had a policy, you didn't walk on a conveyor belt. Pretty logical policy, right? It's not really safe to walk on a conveyor belt. But you know what? I walked on a conveyor belt today when I was coming here. Where did I do that at? The airport. They got people movers. It's a conveyor belt. That's all it is, okay? So why did I walk on that? Because you move fast. I can get from one end of O'Hare to the other end real fast, okay? So we had supervisors that would do that. They'd get on the conveyor belt and they'd walk and they could shout directions to everybody, okay? Now, meanwhile, they're not supposed to because it's highly dangerous, but they would do it because they could get from one side of the workplace to the other and they could shout directions, see what's going on, all that wonderful stuff. Yet we had a policy that said you don't walk on conveyor belts. So what had to happen to get our vision married up for safety, married up with their actions? What did it take? A supervisor getting terminated is what it took. And then rest management went, whoa. Because you used to have to commit a cardinal sin to get fired back when I was still there. And that was like a, whoa, someone went down for that, really? I mean, then you knew they were serious about it. Okay? Now, I'm not saying termination is the only way to go, but what I'm saying is leadership's actions have to match up with what they're saying. Okay? Now, once we get that going, now the interaction starts, and this is where you can get bogged down based on your culture. How open of a relationship do your people have with their supervisors? Do they feel like they're in an environment where they can offer suggestions? Say, hey, what about? I have an idea, or this isn't working. What if we try? Because if not, we're going to get bogged down right here. My wife's in sales, and she finds herself on a lot of shipping docks. She walked into one of her customers recently, and they had changed the entire process for how product got to the loading docks and got loaded onto tractor trailers. And she started talking to the transportation manager about that. And he said, oh yeah, we brought in this group of industrial engineers, and they did this study, and we paid them 50 grand, and then it costs us 100 grand to modify all this stuff, but we're going to be fast, and we're going to be lean, and we're going to be mean, and all this great stuff. She's like, oh, cool. A month later, she went in, it was all gone. Why?
Didn't work.
Didn't work. It was a mess. And why didn't it work? Didn't ask the people who were actually using the forklifts and everything, loading these tractor trailers up, about traffic flow and movement. It slowed them down. $150,000 later. You guys have stories, I bet, that can top that. And usually it comes back to we haven't talked to our people about the impact and what we really need. We know we got folks out there that are a lot smarter than us. Let's use them. Let's get that impact or that feedback from them so that we can craft our message and we can change the culture to one of we're all focused on the same thing. Okay? Now, ultimately, what we need to do is we need to make sure that our reward systems also focus on the behaviors we want focused on. So if I stand up here and preach that we are a customer service-oriented company, and you guys are all customer service telephone agents, that sounds pretty good to you, right? We're customer-facing. I want you to resolve your calls. You got the responsibility to resolve one call. You got responsibility. Does that sound good to you? Does that sound like a customer-focused entity? What do you think? No? Yes? What do you think? Sure. I would think it sounds good. I'm giving you all the authority to take that customer's call, resolve their problem, make our customers happy. And then I tell you, because we're a customer-focused entity, but then I tell you that your raise is going to be measured on how many calls you take an hour. We've seen it happen. Now all of a sudden you're like, yeah, you want those boots? Sorry, we don't got them in stock. Anything else I can do for you? All right, thanks for buying. Bam. One more down, let's go. Okay, it becomes an assembly line. Our reward system, how we're measuring people, doesn't compute to what we're all about. Think about your performance management system now. Think about what it is you're doing now. Does it match up with what you truly expect out of your people that truly matters? It's absolutely critical. I can't believe how many organizations I walk into and they still are doing the exact same performance review on every single person in the organization. I say, what is the matter with you? How can you do? Well, everyone should be rated on their teamwork, and everyone should be rated on their attitude, and everyone should be rated on their attendance. I'm like, wait a minute. So the guy who's got the poor attitude, who's your IT programmer, who literally comes in and sits in his cubicle and does nothing all day long but sit in his cubicle, and that's what he does, and that's what we pay him for, we're rating him on teamwork and attitude? That doesn't make any sense to me. So, but again, it's work. But how we impact or how we rate our people, how we set their goals, impacts their perception of whether or not what they do matters and whether those goals are connected to the company's strategic goals. It's critical. Okay? So finally, how do we measure success? If you do everything else, but you can't measure for some reason where you're currently at, or there's just something missing, then you've got to find another goal. So when I was at UPS, it was I've been gone for many years now, and so we were just starting down the road of a lot of the electronics that are in place now. And so, but even back then, our goal was to get you your package on time. So corporate decided, hey, we're going to measure what we call missorts. In other words, packages that show up in a building that don't belong there. Now that sounds like an admirable goal, does it not? Because it tells us what's going on. Now the building that I was in handled HR, we processed between 35 and 50,000 packages a day. And generally we might get 5 to 7 boxes a day that didn't belong in our facility. So it's not a bad ratio when you think about it. And so our operations team would have to call in and say, these 5, 7, whatever showed up here, here's where they were from. And we would get dinged for that. Does that make any sense? No, because we didn't missort them to our own building. They came in from someone in Chicago. Well, wait a minute, what's going on here? But UPS didn't have the tracking mechanism back then to measure who actually loaded that box in Chicago and put it on a trailer to Pennsylvania when it should have been going to Idaho. That's where it should happen. So if you have those logistical challenges, you've got to find something else to measure. Because we all took a nice big goose egg on that section of our performance review that year over something that we had no control over. So don't hold your people accountable to things they have zero control over. You're going to kill morale. Okay. So again, here's where the management accountability comes in. Are we holding our managers accountable to certain behaviors, and are they holding their people accountable to those same behaviors? So it's not a do as I say, not as I do scenario. Absolutely, probably one of the most important things so far that we've talked about. So you follow these 4 steps. They're not that hard when you think about it. They're relatively easy. All you've done at that point is you've communicated out. Now we've got to keep people focused on it. And this is where the hard part is, okay? And so when we think about it, well, let me take a step back. That's why we can't have a flavor of the month scenario. We can't have, if your company is known for this is important this month, and this is going to be important next month, and we know that in 3 months from now something else is going to be important, what do people do in that environment? They just wait for the next one because why should I work on this one? It's going to change anyway. Nothing ever happens then. No flavor of the month. Okay? Can't do it. All right. So we get that alignment. People are focused. They're fired up about what they're doing and how it's impacting the company. How do we keep them? How do we reward them for what's going on? All humans, mostly adults especially, we need feedback. We need we got to answer the what's in it for me question. You're telling me I got to stay focused on company strategy, and if I do that, company's going to make all kinds of money. What's in it for me? If I stay focused on company strategy and our customers love us, great, what's in it for me? We all want to know that. We probably won't look at our boss and say that, but we're thinking it. And so we've got to think about, once we get that line of sight created, and I can walk up to one of your people and say, hey, what do you do and how does it connect? And they rattle it off, great. How do I keep them focused on that? Okay? If you think about all of HR, does this not sum up what we do? We put together a rewards package that's going to attract some folks in. They're going to shake our hand and say, yes, I will work for you for that rewards package, and I will bring my full attention to the job. And we say, thank you very much. If you bring your full attention to the job, we will give you this nice rewards package. It's simple, really, when you think about it. There's a lot of other complicating factors, obviously, but HR at its heart is kind of simple. It comes down to this, okay? So if you believe that, whose fault is this guy? It says, if you aren't fired with enthusiasm, you will be fired with enthusiasm. Whose fault is this? Any ideas? Management? Okay, thank you. How many of you get blamed for this guy? You hired another deadbeat for me, HR. Thanks a lot. Well, wait a minute. You second interviewed him. You didn't think he was a deadbeat 3 months ago. I showed this slide when I was doing a topic very similar to this to a group of business owners. And one guy got irate with me. I'd fire him. You're darn right I'd fire him with enthusiasm. I'd fire him right now. I want self-starters. I want go-getters. I said, well, who hired this guy? Well, I would have. I said, well, what happened between the time you hired him when you thought he was a go-getter and now? Well, he's not motivated anymore. Well, whose fault is that? Because it's not his. In most cases, it's not his. It's ours. We did something. Now, granted, I get it. I've been in your chairs. I've hired my share of duds as well. Okay, they smoked you in the interview. You're like, wait a minute, 2 weeks later, who are you? Because you're not the person I interviewed. Okay, it happens. We know that. Okay, but when you think about it, that's kind of rare. It really is. It should be rare. Okay, so here's the thing. These are some stats. You guys have seen these stats. Right now, Gallup says half of our workforce not engaged. Anyone surprised by that stat? No, you probably see it. Okay, this one's a little scarier. Mercer says almost a third of our employees say they're going to leave their job in the next year. Anyone surprised by that? No, shouldn't be. Especially if you've got a younger workforce, we know they're going to be mobile. There's no changing it. That's life. Okay? If you're wishing cradle to grave employment days, gone, you missed that by 20 years. Okay? So we know at any given point in time, our workforce is going to churn more than in the past. Okay? This one's the worst. Nearly 60% would leave their profession. Look around. There's a lot of us in here. That means 6 out of 10 of us, we're getting the heck out of HR. And you're probably going, darn right we are. Okay? So that's scary. And then we think about, where's our talent coming from? Okay? When people want to get the heck out of their career because it's so miserable in their career. Okay? Take a look. Here's a little bit of interaction. Take a look at this list. These are the things that I would argue are the top things that motivate and retain people. I want you to give me your top 3. Just jot them down. What are the top 3 things that you believe, or maybe your management team believes, would motivate people? They don't need to be in order. Just pick 3. Got them? Okay, so guess what? A study was done on this very thing. Whole lot of companies, whole lot of management people, and this is what they said. How many of you had management climate in your top 3? Okay, great. How many of you had supervisor in your top 3? How many of you had culture in your top 3? Anyone get the trifecta? Nice. Before you pat yourselves on the back, here's what the employees said. Exact same companies, exact same time frame. Now, people throw stuff at me. Ed, come on. Benefits, we know people quit their supervisor. What is the matter with you? I had someone say this to me in a session. She got blah on me. I don't care whether you agree with the results. What does this say?
It says if you're not able to support yourself on what you're making with your benefits and comp, the rest doesn't matter.
Okay, so there's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing going on. What else? Perception's the problem around here. You don't have to agree with the management side. You don't have to agree with the employee side. But the reality is, same companies in this survey, and we don't even have the same top 3. There's the moral of the story. So what do you do to figure this out? It's real simple. What do you got to do? Ask your people what they want. Okay? So ultimately, it's not all about money, because guess what? There was an analysis of a bunch of studies done on what level of pay raise would get people to act differently. The number is 7%. How many of you gave out a 7% raise to someone in your organization this past year other than because of a promotion? 2, 3, okay? Happened to a couple people, all right? We don't see 7% raises. We see 2%. Because, hey, that's what everyone's giving, 2%. You know what 2% is? It's pepperoni on your pizza. I mean, let's be honest. It's really what it is. And then we wonder why. Well, I just gave you a 2% raise. And you can get pepperoni on your pizza every Friday night now. And you're not willing to make an extra widget for me? We wonder, hello, okay? Money's not the end-all, be-all, okay? And so really what we're saying is maybe the award system has to be different. Maybe instead of giving you that 2% out over the course of a year so all you get is pepperoni, maybe I give you that $500 now or that $1,000 now. Boom, one time, done. There it is. What does that do? What does that change in the individual? Okay, I get some money in hand, and it's football season, and I go out and buy a nice flat screen, and every time I click the on button for my flat screen, I think, there's my bonus. There's my bonus. They're not thinking that when they have indigestion from their pepperoni pizza. Like, yeah, thanks, boss. You gave me indigestion. You got my 2% raise. Thank you. No. So think about how we allot our dollars and our reward dollars, okay? You have in the slides are out on your website. You have a ton of information out there that will help you to figure out the rewards piece of this. What I would ask you to do is to step away from what you normally do. And I'm going to finish with one other story about the power of that. I had a retirement care community that I was working with on their whole total rewards. They were spending $40,000 a year on their company picnic. Now, this was a large organization, and they had beautiful grounds. And so, 20, 30 years ago, they could have their employee picnic on their company grounds. And they would have a pig roast, and everyone brought their family, and it was a great, great time. Okay? But as times progressed, they got too big for that. They go to the local amusement park. And you get your burgers and dogs, but you wander around the amusement park, so there's really no time for employees to truly hang out anymore. And then they decide, you know what, this is getting expensive, so employees are covered, but we will ask the family members to pay $5 to go to the park. I mean, is that reasonable? I think it's reasonable. $5, come on. It's normally $55 to get in the place, and you're getting your lunch. Guess what? People started grumbling about it. And what they saw was only about a third of the employees went to the park. And a bunch of those were complaining that they had to spend $5 for their kids to go into the park. And so I said, why are you spending $40,000 on something only a third of your people want and half of them are grumbling about? What did they say? We've always had a company picnic, Ed. It was like the sacred cow there. And I thought they were going to run me out of town. When I said, you got to get rid of that. Take that $40,000 a year and let's do something else with it. Contrast that with, on your birthday, everyone in that same organization gets a gift certificate to go to the local bake shop to get a cake. Now, you can have that cake done any way you want, any flavor you want, any icing you want, decorated any way you want, full custom cake. 99% of those certificates get used every single year. $10 a head. What are the employees saying to them? So after you go through and you create the message, ask them what they want, what's going to keep them focused on the mission. Because that's the key to your attraction and retention and ultimately the motivation of your workforce. It goes back to that handshake agreement. What we're offering enough of an exchange for me to continue to work harder for you? Because think about what you offered me at the beginning when I accepted employment. The terms change every year when you change my goals. If you don't significantly change the terms on your side, why should I continue to work towards the goals? We get out of equilibrium. So I thank you for your time. Again, there's lots of juicy tidbits out there in the slides that are posted. I would also appreciate your feedback. That's why I have some sheets out there. Please jot your notes down and leave it for me. I get that. It's a lot more detailed than what you'll get asked on your app. And I will hang out here and answer any questions that you might have. But thank you.